those moments when an idea catches fire is so important. So as an entrepreneur, if you're thinking of trying to start an online movement of any kind, you need to think about who your first allies are going to be. Who are the people that are most likely to pick up the standard of what you're suggesting to them as a way to get together and to interact and really pull them in as allies.
Welcome to Clicks and Bricks Podcast. We talk about the entrepreneur mindset.
If you get one shot at this, what kind of shot are you going to take?
If we forget who we are, they're going to forget who you are.
And you've got an adversity story that's out of this world.
Everything from that Main Street brick and mortar to that billion-dollar manufacturer.
Talking with Todd with Clocktower Advisors. He helps companies build meaningful communities. And if you know that your business could use a community to help you sell, watch this episode. How are you doing today, Todd?
Hey, Ken, thanks for having me on the show.
No problem. Thank you for joining us. I know you're busy. So before we jump into more about what you do, can you tell the audience about how you got started and specifically then what Clocktower Advisors does?
So Clocktower Advisors, I got into this world. It's a two-part answer to this because the first part of my career was really as a technical recruiter. So I worked in the tech space with some companies down in Milwaukee and Chicago for close to about 15 years. And in the course of that, in my off time, I spent time in online communities, discussion forums, and platforms that were emerging around the time of social media, coming out. I've more formally moved into this space somewhere around 2009, 2010, and started working specifically with platforms that enable collaboration and interactions between members of a workplace or collaboration for teams that are external to that for special events, things like that. I started working with a global consultancy specialized in online communities right around 2013. And then I've never looked back. So I started my company around 2015, and Clocktower Advisors has been running on its own with many customers since about, certainly for the past 5 years, but the company's been around for at least 7 now.
Fantastic. So can you tell us a little bit about that, how that works? So you were working for another company, 2015, you start Clocktower Advisors, but it wasn't your full-time gig yet. How were you, getting clients and maintaining your bills, starting this new company? And I'm assuming you maintain a job or you cash out retirement money. How did you survive when you were getting those first clients in the door and kicking up that revenue stream?
I was super fortunate. My start was almost like a start with training wheels, man, because at the time that I left the agency around 2015, I knew that I needed to make some changes. I had some stuff going on in my personal life that I needed to make room for. The long hours that were involved with flying around the country to different customers and doing that work, it just wasn't going to work for me. I just needed a little more flexibility in my time. So I stepped away from it entirely. I just said, look, I need to take a hard stop and pivot to something new. But I knew I wanted to stay in the community space. That was really important to me. So what I did is I started up Clocktower Advisors as an LLC because I got networked with a really tremendous thought leader within the community space, a guy by the name of Richard Millington, who runs Feverbeat, giving him a free plug. Brilliant guy who was really my first customer, so to speak, because I needed to work corp to corp with him because he's a UK-based business. So I started up Clocktower Advisors originally as just a vehicle for that, but thinking like, well, if I have other kinds of customers or things that I bring in over time, that'd be great. As it turned out, my journey with Richard was very fulfilling. I was with him for about a year and a half, 2 years. But as some of my work with him started to taper off, I was able to pick up some other customers and really start to fill in my billable time from there. So I did start initially with him on kind of a part-time basis. It quickly became really almost a full-time gig for me for those 2 years. And then it slowly turned out that it opened up to some other customer opportunities, including some customers that I've continued to work with to this day. So those are partners that I either work with on a corp to corp basis that are other consultancies, or they're direct customers that I've had longstanding relationships with. So it really was. I talk about it as sort of training wheels. I had a very fortunate situation that I was able to do that, and the stability that it's really brought me up to full billable time now at this point.
That's fantastic. I think so many times when things just line up right and kind of the universe tells you, hey, this is the time to jump, it's the perfect time, and you just kind of go through those motions, and it tends to work itself out, even though it's scary. If you're willing to wake up every morning and do that hustling, that grind, and do the thing that you love doing at your best level, I think great things end up happening.
Absolutely. So. I wish I had done it years before.
Now, I see your shirt says community builder, and maybe I've got a warped sense of what the world is, but when I hear the word community builder, I instantly think online community. Do you focus on online communities, or you also help people build communities out in the real world as well?
Well, it's an interesting question. So first of all, the t-shirt is a shout out to CMX. They're great builders of online communities. And yes, I mean, I think it's hard to pull online and offline apart that much. So if you think about online communities, those are communities mediated by these technologies that we have. They've most typically consisted of asynchronous conversations with each other. Like I post something and then 7 hours later, you see my post and you reply back to my post, and then somebody else jumps in. Those kinds of interactions are good and powerful, but they're not always necessarily intuitive to us, especially if you're not used to working in online environments. I think that those face-to-face interactions with communities, in physical spaces, are at the heart of community building. So in so many cases, the launch of online communities that I help or do strategy work around begin with a live event, or they begin with a group of people that are already together and they have this formation of a community. We can define community a little bit. I can get into that, but that whole idea of you're doing a conference for your customers, or you're doing a live roundtable event. You launch your community there. You launch your online community there so that you can get them all signed up and get them signed in, answer their questions, get them comfortable with it. Because of the way that those community platforms, and there are hundreds of these more private kinds of community solutions. I'm talking mostly about them, not necessarily about a Facebook group or a LinkedIn group or your TikTok community or whatever you want to call that. Well, we can maybe split those hairs, in a little bit, but getting people into those spaces so that they feel comfortable and safe and like it's a trusted environment where they can share with each other. So that those live components are so essential. Or even if you have ended up launching a community in an online space first and got people talking to each other and knowing each other a little bit, and I've seen work this way as well, then you do a live event and it really solidifies some of those relationships and helps people to really come back into the platform and then interact even more. And I was fortunate to have some of those experiences very early in my career, just with my online gaming groups and things that I've done, where you get to know people really deeply as whatever their persona is that they're playing in an online game, in an RPG, but then really understanding what they're like because of the person behind that character, and then meeting them in person really deepens that trust and those relationships. I think, again, you can't pull those two things apart.
Right. I think the state of the internet today, and I've grown up on the internet. I've been, I'm an early adopter since I had the 14 baud modems when I was a kid, right? So
you and me both, brother.
I've been in this game for a very, very long time, probably longer than most people on the planet today. And it's really sad where we're at today because we're living in a world of winner has taken most, right? And the Facebooks of the world have really taken the most. And, Amazon's really taken away from the brick and mortar, and at Clicks and Bricks, we love that word "and" so much that it doesn't have to be or, right? Facebook doesn't have to be the only winner. You can create your own online community that's niched down to, the things that you love to do, the things that the area that you're in, right? Any of those things, you can really start creating a community based around there. And it doesn't have to have all the features of Facebook or any of those things. Now, I've been down this boat a couple of times building communities, and actually probably more than a couple times. And it's always really frustrating. My biggest fear is always, we put on a big event or we do all this planning, and it comes down to, that hour before the show starts or whatever. And it's a pretty nerve-wracking experience. Like, is anybody going to actually show up to this? I've put all this effort in. Is somebody going to show up? How am I going to get somebody? Or are we standing here all alone and just wasted all this effort? What do you recommend somebody that's thinking, hey, I'm going to do this, but they have that fear of, man, I don't want to do all this and have nobody show up, or, it just sit here and be stagnant. How do you get somebody over that hurdle when you're talking about the first time when they're coming and saying, hey, we think a community would help us grow our business?
It's a great question. It's one of those things that fascinated me and continues to fascinate me about like how we start to accumulate people around a movement. And so, you can look at things on the internet about sort of the first follower. And, I think that's part of the key is finding that first person who gets the vision of what you want to do. They want to become a proponent of it. They help you to spread the word about that. And it becomes 5 people, becomes 10 people, becomes more. I had an early experience of that when I was around the time when I was making that career pivot around 2008 or so. That was that tech downturn that we saw, and people were having pink slip parties, and they were kind of getting, they were finding themselves, out looking for a job for the first time. I ended up doing an event in Milwaukee. It was an unconference style event called Milwaukee Job Camp, and I think I saw that happen. And it happened really strangely. I messaged some people on LinkedIn in some of the early days of LinkedIn there. And actually, they'd been out a few years before. But anyways, the message was just sort of my vision for what this event, could be. And I'll still remember to this day, the kernel of it was that it got picked up and shared by about 50 people that were in my space, which at the time was recruiting and human resources. And it kind of caught fire as an idea. And that core group of volunteers were able to take that vision and turn it into what became 4 really big, successful events where we had, a couple thousand people that showed up who didn't know what to expect, but we were really clear about saying, this is not a job fair. This is a place for you to get better at your career and to affect your mindset and to do the things you need to do, prepare for a job search in a world where social media is increasingly taking a role in that process. Because there were a lot of people at that time got caught out of a job that didn't have any real sense of what it was to have a good LinkedIn profile. There's still a lot of people that don't have that. But those moments when an idea catches fire is so important. So as an entrepreneur, if you're thinking of trying to start an online movement of any kind, you need to think about who your first allies are going to be. Who are the people that are most likely to pick up the standard of what you're suggesting to them as a way to get together and to interact and really pull them in as allies, as partners in that process. You need those early proponents, and the research around this suggests maybe between 5 and 25 people is really all you need to kind of get started. And to be honest, I think we're often way too focused on like how big is your community, how big is that network. I don't care if it's just 25 or 30 people. If they're monetizing for you in ways that are meaningful, if they're your customer base and you take care of them, and they're like gold, that could be easily a 6-figure income for you if that's the way that if you're running your business out of that online community space.
Absolutely, the power of a community where they're all in line with the same agendas can be wildly powerful. When I was a kid, I worked in the music industry, and you had mainstream bands and you had kind of niche bands, and the niche bands were always like, I'd rather have 10 really great fans that buy 100% of my merchandise than 10,000 fans that only listen to me on the radio, right? So yeah. It's really about building that tribe and that culture around whatever it is that you're passionate about and that group of people's passionate about. And it can literally be like, what's the craziest community that you think you've built? Like that would just be like, wow, I couldn't believe that somebody could build a community out of that.
Yeah, I've worked in a lot of fairly conventional communities, but some of the cooler ones that I've seen, there was a Ning community I ran into many years ago that was called the Society of Bearded Gentlemen. It was an online community just for guys with beards of all sorts. That
Yeah.
was the criteria for entry for it. Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of interesting ones that are out there. I think there's my friend Jenny Wiggle, who runs a consultancy around community building. She's done some really interesting ones that she showcases them on her website sometimes. But that's one she had was like an elf on the shelf community or something like that. They get really specific
Right.
with some of this stuff.
But that elf, people
you know,
love that elf, right? It comes out once a year. It's seasonal, and it's
Yep.
huge. It's meme building and all kinds of stuff. You can definitely build. I can see how you can build a community around people that love the elf on the shelf.
Yeah, I mean, I think if you're thinking about sort of definitionally, like what makes a good online community, I mean, very specifically, like the cooler, the more niche, thing, those things can often do really, really well,
Right.
because people get super passionate about them. Like I'm a nerd through and through. I've been playing Dungeons and Dragons for ages and ages, and I have great love, for that game because it's helped me to be who I am today. But the niches are so specific on this. Like there's an early 1980s edition of that game that has a dedicated Facebook group of like 1,500, 2,000 people. And it's astounding. Like, are there that many people that are interested in this edition of the game that's really not really played that much anymore? But there's a surprisingly passionate following around that super niche down interest.
Yeah, I know that we built a community years ago. We exited about two or 3 years ago. It was yojo.com, and we had a large database, the largest database of GI Joe figures in the world, and we
Nice.
sold it. But it was a huge community and that community had a bunch of sub communities, right? So you have people that love GI Joe, and then you've got the 1/8 inch and the different sizes, and it did get a little too deep for my taste, but definitely a huge community about GI Joe action figures. Not even about GI Joe, right? It was literally the action figures that people really, really loved, and continued to come back to talk about what they had and what, remembering when they were a kid and playing with these things. So it's a huge piece of today's society, and I love that you're making these sub or micro communities. I don't always call them micro. That seems little.
It seems to minimize them a little bit, but I mean, they're just communities with very deep special interests that are there. And if you think about like what it is that makes that a community, there's probably a couple of criteria for people that belong to that. If you think about a community for moms who happen to be in healthcare, then you've got two criteria for people that could look at a given website and sort of a landing page that describes what that community is for. If I'm a working mom and I'm in the healthcare space and I see things that as I'm reading down the page, oh yeah, that's me. Oh boy, yeah, that's a huge pain point for me. I'm more likely to click join that community than not. So like having a really well-defined description of what's in it for me, what am I going to get out of it? And then also being super clear about why you as an organization or as an entrepreneur are creating that community, like what you're hoping people get out of that is incredibly important too.
Yeah, and not just in the community. This is important for all business owners, entrepreneurs. When you're selling your product, and if you're selling your online community or your community, you're still selling it, right? You're trading something. You want their time, their information to be part of your community. So that's still some kind of trade that you're doing. So, but the more you can talk about the benefits to the end user and not yourself, you're way better off, right? So I know that we like the laundry list, the features of the things that we do for people, but it's so much more powerful if you talk about the benefits they'll get from that feature, not the, you can store a lot of pictures and, all those technical details. It's a trap that I fall into all the time.
Right. Tell me about the benefits. Why do I need to be here? What am I going to get out of it? And I think the necessity of making sure, here's something for your viewers and listeners, to think about as you're forming this idea of a community. You need to think about there's 3 levels of safety and trust that those potential customers need to think about in order to feel like they can start sharing in these online spaces. First level is the technology itself. What kind of platform are you picking? Do you have site security certificates? Is it a good user experience? Does it seem skeevy? Is there like not a little lock on the domain name, that's there? Because if those things aren't there, you're not going to get people. They're even if they're not big techies, they're going to see something's off about the site. Second level is organizationally for your business. You need to be super clear about why you're doing this. You need to be transparent about like how you might use information, in the community, about how they might be contacted. Just basic kinds of one-on-one stuff. Like, I'm a pharmaceutical company. We're taking insights from what people say in this community. We're anonymizing them, but we're using them to improve our services. Great. Tell me that up front. Don't make me guess at what that is. And that third level of safety and trust is about helping the members trust each other. I need to have a reasonable assumption of benevolence of the other people that are in that platform with me. They're not skeevy. They're not going to try to sell to me. I'm not going to be sold to. That they want essentially the same kinds of things as me. Because if those three levels of safety and trust are not met, you're not going to have any kind of interaction in the platform at all.
Right. Now, I know when you're building anything, especially an online community, it requires other people to come into the fold, right? You need them to come in because that, at the end of the day, the users are the service and the product, right? So, and integrity is really, really important if you want to maintain that user trust amongst each other. How do you advise somebody that's building that community? Because they have two goals, right? They want to maintain that integrity, but they also want their community to grow. So the temptation to just let anybody in is really great. How do you coach people on saying, you know what, you have to have the right users and you don't just let anybody in the door. You got to create that line. How do you balance that desire for growth versus desire for a quality community to make sure, and I know that you probably have that conversation on the front side, but 30 days in, people are scratching their head and they want to run. How do you keep them on task with that?
Yeah, I mean, I think you have to have a big boy or a big girl talk, with yourself about, am I just going for numbers here? Because if I'm just going to go for numbers, I'm going to fail. If I'm predicating my success based on how many people are signing up for the community, I'm not doing myself any favors, because what I'll probably see is if I'm doing a big ad campaign and I'm trying to get a bunch of people added into this community setup that I've created on whatever platform it happens to be, what happens a lot is you'll then see like a big spike in signups, but then a precipitous drop off of people coming back into the community over time. So that if you're not careful, you could end up doing these Herculean heroic efforts of trying to bring people into the platform, and then it falls off, and then you try to bring the next group in and it falls off. And so you end up with this sort of sawtooth blade of metrics over time. Instead, what you should be going for is getting people into that platform who belong in that platform, who see the value of it, so that you're not getting like this large group of people that are immediately going to go away. But you're getting people to come in, and then you are really thinking about how you're onboarding and keeping them there. And there are some definite best practices about greeting newcomers as they come into the space, encouraging them to complete a personal profile, to do their first post, talk about what they care about, reaching out to them privately one-on-one with a message within the platform, asking them what they need or how you can help, and then getting them engaged with other people as quickly as possible, reminding them of great resources that are within your platform as soon as possible. These are all practices to make sure that you're building a quality, thriving, and sustainable, and I'll underline that triply, sustainable community that's, instead of seeing that sawtooth blade, you're seeing something that's actually growing slowly over time until you've reached your maximum addressable audience.
Right. Now, I don't know if you've read the book. I'm pretty sure you probably have, The Lean Startup, and you've got the Lean Method. And that talks a lot about listening to your community about feature ads and changes and things like that. When you're building a community, like for anything, how important is it to maintain your original desire on what you were building the community for, or really letting the audience kind of, or the people in the community kind of start manipulating and growing that community and letting it be its own thing. Do you think that those two things, you should try to avoid them, or let them happen, or let them coexist together?
Well, it's a amazingly interesting and complex question, because I'm a big believer in the emergent design of communities. Because a impulse that I see with a lot of organizations is they'll want to create this community. I'll call it the community architecture or the infrastructure, all these different groups, topics, areas that they think that their members are going to want to see. And what will happen in those cases is they'll launch this community, and it's the field of dreams. You've built it, but then nobody comes, or you've got this ornate architecture, and it's like this huge ghost town that's been built where there's no activity in any of the rooms that have been created, within the space. So you need to, as you're planning that community, you need to spend some time validating what you think that's going to be by doing interviews with the people that you think are going to be members, and reaching out to them and asking them for their opinions about what they want, what they need, what they see as the key topics are, and really limiting yourself to begin with the structure of what that community is going to look like. But then your members over time are going to start to give you feedback about what they like or what they don't like. Some of them are going to ask for additional topics or groups or spaces that are out there. I just came across this as a question in one of the communities that I belong to this morning. The person was asking, like, I've got 12 topics in my community and I feel like it's too many. When people come into the community, they don't know, they maybe don't know where to go. And she's right. It's a cognitive overload with too many options that are there. So you need to guard against that. And if your community members start saying, like, well, I want this group and that group and that group, you as the owner of that space need to make some final decisions about what's acceptable and what's not. So yes, you need to hear them about what they want and what they need, but you need to ultimately make some hard decisions based on what is going to be good for the overall experience of that community. So you need to, whether you're a solopreneur or whether you're a big company, you need to put in place some governance and some guidelines around, what are your rules for opening up a new group or a new discussion thread or a new topic area for your members. And good rule of thumb is, if you see that there's a topic area in one of your general categories that people have really jumped on the bandwagon for, and you've got 30, 50, 90 comments around a particular topic, then it might be time to think about opening something new to go with. By the same token, if you have topics that are out there that just haven't resonated and nobody's posted in that subgroup or that area for 60, 90 days, you might just want to throw it in the can and just archive it or lock that thread and make it go away, just so that it's a little easier for people to navigate around and see where the real action is within your space.
Absolutely. I think that's great advice. I know that I have destroyed websites or communities in the past by thinking I know what the user wants and making big changes, and I've completely destroyed things by not listening to the audience more clearly. In that particular cases, they were happy with what they were getting, and I wanted to make it better, and evidently made it worse. So it's really, really important to listen to your audience, but also hold your convictions and make sure that you're deploying what you believe is the best features for your users. And my last piece of advice there would be, go slow. Don't change too much at one time. When you're going to add a group, add the group, test it, make sure that it's, people are using it before you start deleting other groups. Or if you go in one day and add 10 groups, then you're right, you're going to confuse the heck out of people, and they're not going to know what you wanted to do. You're going to have a bunch of empty groups with no data in them. Todd, I've had a blast so far. If somebody wanted to work with you, how would they get in contact with you to get the ball rolling if they wanted to build a community?
Yeah, well, occupational hazard of being a digital strategist, you can find me just about anywhere. But I spend the most time on LinkedIn. You can connect with me directly out there, or you could go to clocktoweradvisors.com and go through any of the links there. Will either help you send me a direct message, or you can set up a meeting with me via Calendly directly there. So I talk to a lot of people about what they want to build, and I never charge for those upfront conversations, because sometimes you're just you just need somebody to help you figure out if it's the right thing for you and the right thing for your organization. And many times it's a matter of not if community is right, but how you make it right for your particular business and what you're trying to create. So those would be the best ways to catch me.
Wonderful. And I think it's a great idea. If you're struggling on building a community, reach out to Todd. And, I think we might have a little consult on the side here at some point in the future as well. Appreciate everything that you're doing. Now, you and I have been in this business for a long time. Back in, I took my first HTML class, I think, in somewhere in the 90s at WashU, and it was a blast. Yep. So I've been through this whole transition of the internet 1.0, 2.0, which we're currently exiting, and we're going into this new crazy world of Internet 3.0. How do you think Internet 3.0 is going to change the face of not just online communities, but communities in general? If you want to dive into the online community specifically, I'm fine there, but just how that's going to change, everything we think about what a community is.
Yeah, so I've been really fascinated about this space. In fact, I had a piece that just came out this morning up on Vanilla Software about Web3 and the world of NFTs and decentralized identity. I'm particularly excited about the things that blockchain style technologies can do in the online community space. I'm less overwhelmed by what's currently happening with the world of NFTs and the craze of trading NFTs and buying them and flipping them, for cash. I think that's sort of a get rich quick sort of scheme that is going to fall flat at some point soon. And if you follow guys like Gary Vaynerchuk, talking about this, I mean, he's fully expecting a collapse, sometimes this year around so much of that. But if you're in those things for the long haul, great, fantastic. NFTs are interesting. But I think the things that are most exciting to me about the blockchain and NFTs and decentralized identity and decentralized autonomous organizations, and that's a bunch of gobbledygook and applesauce for anybody that is maybe new to the space. There's a lot of good articles out there on them. But what's cool to me is right now, living in the Web 2 world, what that means is you've got your social media style platforms where you sign up for a given platform. You log in with it, you create a personal profile for yourself, and then you get to work doing your posting and content sharing and collaboration work. The promise of the blockchain means that I maybe have a decentralized identity, a wallet, I think is the terminology that we're using for this now, a virtual wallet that has markers or things in it that identify my interests or things about me. Think of it as like a portable LinkedIn profile. That just talks about things that you've done because maybe you've accumulated social tokens or NFTs that say that you're interested in skiing or that you are a lover of certain kinds of books. And those things, show up as almost like receipts or as like collectible cards in that wallet. When you sign into a new community, rather than filling out your online profile in that community, someone that would refer to your wallet if they want to learn a little bit more about you. And so that portability of identity and that sort of more blended view of who I am as a person is going to be, I think, interestingly implemented in the near future. And I also think that, we'll be able to deploy different wallets to express different attributes of our identity to others. And we may choose to use this virtual wallet to log into this type of community and my more work professional kind of wallet to log into this kind of community. But I think ultimately it will save us work and the stress of having to sign into something new. We'll just authenticate against that. So it takes out of the way a lot of the current authorization processes that are technical glitches and hurdles for getting new members into those communities. And then within communities themselves, the idea of an NFT or a non-fungible token, which right now I think most people think of in terms of like a fun JPEG image or a animated GIF. It could be music, it could be anything really. But I think within an online community, an early implementation is probably going to be something like what we have now for gamification, except the badges that I might earn for doing something in a community can now be an NFT that I can use as maybe my avatar and even in my social media, or something that I have in my wallet and I bring to other communities, and it shows things that I've meaningfully accomplished, such as I made a great contribution post to this community on great recipes, and people really loved it. Well, I got an NFT because I had this awarded recipe within this community. Well, then I go to this other community and I join and talk about my work as a chef, and I've got this here as bling that I can basically show off within that space as well. So I think the portability of identity is going to be really important, and I think the representation of accomplishment with things like NFTs is going to be really cool. And then using those NFTs, finally, I'm sorry for the long-winded answer, but using those NFTs is going to be interesting as well, because then we start getting into the idea of being able to use them as tokens to vote on changes within a given community. And that's starting to move into the territory of a DAO, or a decentralized autonomous organization. And so if anybody's hearing those kinds of words, that means that I, as a member of a given community, if I've made contributions, if I've gotten sweat equity and gotten rewarded with an NFT, that may give me a bigger vote about what changes in a given community. Like, are there new groups that are created, or are we offering certain kinds of events, or are there certain perks that are offered? I may get a bigger vote than you if you haven't actually contributed to that community, if you've just joined and just started moving around. So I think the implications for that are going to be really profound. And I hope I didn't go too far down the rabbit hole with some of the technical terminology for this for the audience.
No, and the NFT talk, I think, is huge right now. I'm pretty deep in NFTs. We're currently creating an NFT for Clicks and Bricks for all of our guests, right? So one of the accomplishments that you've done is now you've been a guest on Clicks and Bricks, and hopefully we're done by March, and you'll get your NFT airdropped to you for your Clicks and Bricks guest. It's a great way to track things digitally long term. It's also a great way to transfer the asset. So, I think NFTs are right now in the same boat that the internet was in the mid 90s. Cryptocurrency was, 2005, 2010. I think we're all in that same kind of boat right now. It's not going away. And in VR, virtual reality and augmented reality, that's how we're going to make change trades, right? I have no doubt in my mind that I'm going to, inside a virtual world, if I hand somebody a virtual item that's going to actually ship to them in real life, I think that transaction is going to happen on the blockchain as an NFT and keep moving. So it's coming. You probably need a study on it now, because you're not going to avoid it. I guess you could avoid it completely and just not. I don't think Internet 2.0 is going to go away. Do you? I think Internet 2.0 is going to exist inside Internet 3.0.
Yeah. I think it's going to evolve. I think we're going to slowly find ourselves slipping in that direction. And, pretty soon we'll say, oh, well, what was this 3.0 thing? It really wasn't a thing. This is just where the internet is right now.
Yeah.
But I'm excited about that. And I'm definitely excited about VR and AR, because I think that's going to have some profound changes for online communities as well. If suddenly the central metaphor is not text messages exchanged, pixels on a screen, and it's not even me needing to get into a video call with you, but I can move into a fully immersive environment. Yes. The opportunity to build community is going to explode, I think, from there.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for your time today, Todd. Do you have anything to leave the audience before we go?
No, you know what? I really appreciate it. I would say for anybody that is struggling with their business right now and they're thinking about ways to better engage with their community of customers or prospects, reach out, and I'm happy to advise and point you to some resources that I think will be a big help in that process.
Thank you for your time today. I had a blast. That's
Thanks,
it for today's show, folks. If you'd like to join my text line community, it's super simple. All you do is send any question about business or technology to the number 314-370-2871, and I will send you a completely free, unbiased answer. Get to work.